Welcome. Today we'll be tackling a question under the topic simple macro model, and the question says, with your elementary knowledge of simple macro model of market economy, carefully build a simple bread model. So now the lecturer or the examiner assumes that we already have a basic knowledge of what a simple macro model economy is. But before we build a bread model, we have to really understand what a macro model is. Macro model is a mathematical representation of the relationship between the input variables and the output variables. Remember that our case study is bread. So now, before we build a bread model, you remember that we have two variables when it comes to a model, which are the input variables and the output variables. This input variable can also be referred to as the exogenous variables, and this exogenous variable, they are independent variables, which means that they are gotten within the model. Now, the other variable is the output variable, and the output variable here is referred to as the endogenous variable. These variables are dependent, that means they are gotten outside the model, which means they depend on the input variable for us to get an answer. Now, let's build our model. To build our model, for us to derive the mathematical representation of simple bread model, we have to look at the interaction between the demand and supply function. This is where we have the quantity demanded of bread and the quantity supply of bread. This interaction will help us to build our simple bread model. The quantity demanded of bread, this represents the quantity demanded of bread. Now, quantity demanded is the amount or the quantity of bread which one is willing and able to buy at a particular point and at a given price. Here now, demand, as we all know, is a function of price and the income of consumers. So here, the quantity demanded of bread equals the price of bread and the income of the consumers. Now, looking at the other variable, which is the quantity supply of bread. Here, the quantity supply of bread simply refers to the quantity of bread that the suppliers are willing, or the producers or manufacturers are willing and able to offer for sale at the market at a given price and at a particular point in time. So now, what determines the quantity of bread that the manufacturer will offer to the market for sale at a particular price? Let's say 10 naira. Here, what determines it is, number one, we have the price of the bread. Remember, the law of supply says the higher the price, the higher the quantity supply. Imagine if there is an increase in the price of bread. It will definitely lead to the producer supplying a higher quantity of bread. So now, supply here is a function of the price of the commodity, which our case study is bread, which is the price of bread, and also the price of other raw material. Because for the producer to be able to manufacture bread and offer to the market as well, it has to get other raw materials, essential raw materials, ready for us to produce bread. These raw materials include flour, we have the butter, we have the water, and other ingredients. So now, this PR represents the price of raw materials for bread. Having gotten the two functions which we need, which are the quantity demanded of bread and the quantity supply of bread, the next step is to equate both the quantity demanded of bread to the quantity supply of bread so that we can reach what we call equilibrium. Equilibrium here is the point where the quantity supply is equal to the quantity demanded. So we have remember that the PR here represents the price of raw materials. And remember that the raw materials here, they are not one, neither are there two, there are many. And here we have the price of raw materials to be, we have the price of flour, we have the price of flour, we have the price of butter, and other raw materials. So now, instead of listing all the whole raw materials, which include the baking powder, the yeast, the vanilla flavor, you will present these with meal, which we know as our error term, That is why we have this PR as the price of our raw material. So this raw material covers all essential and non-essential ingredients that is required in the production of bread. So now we have already equated our equilibrium. So a question might come and it will ask, which factor do we need to adjust for us to reach an equilibrium? And mainly looking at this, you find out that price of bread is a common function in both quantity demanded of bread and quantity supply. So the function that needs to be adjusted for us to reach an equilibrium is the price. So to get quantity demanded of bread to be equal to quantity supply of bread, the price function needs to be adjusted. Now, what else do we do? You represent this mathematical representation using a graphical illustration. Here, we remember that our case study is bread. So you plot a graph that has the demand curve and the supply curve in order to illustrate the relationship between the quantity demanded of bread and the quantity supply of bread. This is the graphical representation of this mathematical representation. Here, this graph simply explains the relationship between the demand and the supply. Remember that we are working with bread. So the vertical axis, which is the x-axis, as you can see, represents the price of bread, whereas the horizontal line, the horizontal axis, which is the x-axis, represents the quantity of bread. Remember, we are working with bread. So here, this illustration simply shows that the law of demand applies here. That is, when there is an increase in price, a decrease in the quantity demanded. Here, our demand curve slopes downwards from left to right, which shows an inverse relationship with demand and price, whereas the supply curve, as you can see, slopes upwards from left to right, which shows a positive relationship between supply and price. Here, when the price was 20 naira, we are working with naira as our price. When the price was 5 naira, the quantity demanded is 4. That means people wanted more of bread. And when the price increased, remember, it is increasing. And when the price increased from 5 naira to 10 naira, the quantity demanded decreased from 4 to 3. So people no longer want to buy more bread because of an increase in price, which simply approves the law of demand, which says the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded, and vice versa. Now, when the price increased again to 15 naira, the quantity demanded decreased to 2. People no longer buy more compared to what they bought before due to an increase in price. So now, what happens to the 15 naira? So this point, remember I told you that the equilibrium is when the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. So this point of intersection, this point of agreement is what we know as the equilibrium, which in most cases is represented with lowercase e. So this is the equilibrium. So if you are asked what is the equilibrium price, the equilibrium price is 15 naira. It is simply the price at which the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. Also, if you are asked the equilibrium quantity here is 2. What happens to this point when the price moves above the equilibrium? Here, when the price moves above the equilibrium price, we call it when the price here, when the price moves above the equilibrium, we call it excess supply. And when the equilibrium price goes beyond the normal equilibrium point, we address it as excess demand. So here, what does excess supply simply means? Excess supply means that the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. So this means the producer might offer 20 bread in the market and ends up selling 10. In this case, the quantity he supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. So we refer to this scenario as what we call excess supply, or you call it shortage in demand. Now, looking at the opposite, which is excess demand, which is a scenario where the equilibrium price falls below where the price falls below the equilibrium price. Here, we refer to it as excess demand. Excess demand is a scenario where the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. Imagine a bread market where the supplier offers 20 bread in the market and the consumers are willing and able to buy 40 bread. In this scenario, the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied, which results to what we call excess demand or shortage in supply. Now, in this scenario, what happens to the equilibrium price? At this point that we have excess demand, due to the fact that the consumers want more, which is greater than what is available in the market, the suppliers or the manufacturer tends to increase the price, thereby making the price to go up in order to get to this equilibrium point. This also supports the law of demand and supply. Now, looking at excess supply, when there is an excess supply, what happens to the price? The price tends to go down because consumers will buy more when there is a deduction in price. So now, this equilibrium point, is it attainable in a real economy, in a livable economy where the forces of demand and supply are not fixed, where prices are controlled by the forces of demand and supply? Is equilibrium attainable? Is it visible? So now, in this scenario, we have two answers which are correct. We have yes and no, depending on your reason. Number one, yes, equilibrium is attainable in a livable economy because in the long run, all the factors of production has been fully utilized and maximized. There is none that is left idle. But why I say no is because in the short run, the whole factors of production has not been fully maximized or fully utilized. So yes is a correct answer and no is the correct answer depending on your reason. Thank you so much for watching up to this time, and this brings us to the end of today's class. Hope you learned a lot. In case you have any confusion or you still need clarification, do well to drop your questions in the comment section. Like, comment and subscribe to this channel so that you get notification once a new video drops.